Shalom, everybody. Welcome to this week's Journey Through Torah. We're in Mishpatim right now. It's amazing how quickly these portions catch up to you. As you're going through them, it's like, wow, we went through that pretty quick, and now we're on to a next one, and then a next one, and then a next one. But that's one of the beautiful things about going through the scriptures continually, is the more we examine it, the more we come back to it, we start to see things that we may have forgotten, and we start to see things that we may not have seen before. But it grows within us, and that is the idea, that as we get the word within us, as we're reading it, examining it, asking questions, we're getting it within us so that it is relevant to our lives today. And the more we go through it, we start to see this thread about how, in the beginning, in the Torah, and then through the prophets and the writings and into the Brit Hadashah, we start to see how all of these things come together. And it's a beautiful, wonderful work, but it's not just meant to be words on a page. It's meant to be something living and growing within you. And so this is a wonderful thing within us. As we go through this portion, we start to see how things are very relevant for our lives today, especially in this parsha Mishpatim. We last week in Yitro, you see the 10 words or the 10 commandments or however you render that. But here we have these things that are given to us. It's like, these are commandments, these are a law. But no, it's not really the point. The point of being at the mountain was to be at the feet of Yahweh, to sit with him, to learn from him, to receive from him, to affirm this covenant that he said he has with us. When he brought Israel out of Mitzrayim, he says, I redeemed you. And so when he redeems us, well, he brings us to himself. See, that's why he brought them out. He redeemed them. He brought them through the water, the mikveh. He brought them to the mountain to receive from him, to learn his ways, and to further develop in their relationship with him. And that's kind of where we're looking today. We're going to talk about relationship, and not just between our Creator and us, but between one another as well. When Moses went up onto the mountain to hear the words of Yahweh, he heard them, but all Israel heard these words as well. Now the difference is Israel heard these words and they backed off away from hearing more. Well, Yahweh wasn't done talking. He wasn't finished speaking to us. And so there are things that he still desires for us beyond what he said. And if we miss that point, then we may not have a good understanding of what's coming later. See, what we need to grasp at its very underestimation, if you will, is when Yahweh spoke to his people, to us, it was about showing his heart. It was about showing his character, revealing his ways to us so that we could learn to walk in paths that he desired for us from the beginning. When he's revealing things in his Torah, he's revealing parts of his character, parts of his life, what he is desiring for us to be more like him. See, and so this is, we're learning to do that. Now, part of this process, it's like it would be great if it was just us and him, right? But part of this process is learning how to develop the character of Yahweh while we're in relationships with one another as well. We are a big family, and as such, we need to learn to function as a family, which means we're all not going to see things exactly the same way. We're not going to do things exactly the same way. I mean, here we are, Israel, and at the base of this mountain, we're talking a few million people, right? So here they are. I can guarantee you not every single person thought, felt, and behaved, exactly the same way. But they were there for a greater purpose. And that's how we need to learn to be with one another. And as we go through this parsha, Mishpatim, it starts to reveal some of these things to us, that Yahweh is very concerned about how we live our lives day to day. He is concerned about how we handle one another and how we treat one another and how we live life with one another, right? So these are some of the things we're going to get into, Okay, so Mishpatim is this portion. Mishpatim, the translation of the word Mishpatim is from the word Shafat. Shofet is a judge, so Mishpatim means justice or judgment between brothers, and we see this in walking in a right relationship, and if we do this right, it's going to bring us to a place of unity, and that's what we need to look at. Because Mishpatim shows us relationships. See, and how much of the word do we see where it's telling us about how to live life regarding our relationships? We know we're supposed to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our might, but we've got to work on this loving our neighbor as ourselves, loving our brothers. We've got to work on that. And that's one of the things that Mishpatim does. Mishpatim, it's all about relationships. Yes, with Yahweh, but with each other as well. And we have to learn, like we had said, we have to learn that each thing he reveals to us, even in Mishpatim, is an expression of his heart, of his righteousness. And yes, it does reveal the character of our Messiah, Yeshua, in the midst of this, because we learn how he walked among us. We learn what mattered to him. When Yeshua was here and he walked among his creation, he didn't change his word, but he showed us where we were misunderstanding things, where we flat out didn't care, or how we were just doing it wrong. So he came to show us the heart of Yahweh and to do that among us. And so we've got to learn to come to a place of unity, and that's where we can all agree we all need to come to a place of unity, but how that happens is where we get into a lot of problems and where we get in a lot of disagreements. But ultimately, we need to focus on why we're at the mountain. Why are we here at the mountain? We've been redeemed. We've mikvahed, right, the baptism, and now we come to him, to the mountain, for discipleship. In other words, we're learning. And if we're learning, there are things that we're going to get right. There are things we're going to get wrong. And some of us learn better than others, or faster than others, or some are slower than others, and that's okay. But we need to just continue to learn. And as we're doing that, there are certain areas of interest where or some people will veer to one area of interest more than another, and that's okay too. But we've got to keep the focus as Yahweh is among us. Here, we are here with him to learn from him. Okay, so these are some of the things we see in Mishpatim. A few scriptures I have for us today. Let's start in Matthew. I know we're talking in Shemot, Exodus 21 through 24, but let's start here. Matthew 5:9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Romans 14:9 says, "So let us pursue what makes for what? For peace and for mutual upbringing." James 3:17 and 18 says that the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. I think we can say we all want wisdom. And hopefully we're all learning to act according to wisdom. But learn that wisdom from above, well, it's not the wisdom of the world, right? So if something just sounds good to us, it doesn't always mean that that's wisdom. We've got to examine our actions, our behavior, even our thoughts and the intent of our hearts, right? Just to make sure that we are lining up with what the Father does desire for us. One of that is, are we walking according to wisdom? Wisdom from above. One of the things that we're real tempted to do, let's put it that way, is when we get a great new revelation of something that we've never seen or heard before, we automatically take that as fact. And maybe it was just a good idea, or you just had an interesting thought, or maybe it's just something for some midrash. You're not done with that thought. You need to work it out a little more. We need to have wisdom to learn how some of this works and applies in our life, right? Let's keep going. Psalm 82:1 says, "Elohim stands in the divine assembly. There with the Elohim, he judges." Interesting to say, word Elohim, speaking of Yahweh, our creator, and Elohim is also therefore earthly powers, judges, those are in authority here. So the idea here is that when the judges are in the earth and they are listening to the word of Yahweh and they are walking it according to making judgments that are in his Mishpatim, they're doing it the right way, that Yahweh is there judging with them. Why? Because they're walking according to his righteousness, because they're doing it the way that he said to do it. It's not our own thoughts, ideas, not selfish intent, or not favoring one person over the other. It's learning to walk in his ways that we see in this, right? Proverbs 28:5 says, evil men understand not judgment, but they that seek Yahweh understand all things. Now, this word for judgment is mishpat. Say they do not beno, bain is to discern or to understand, and then mishpat is the word used there for judgment, right? So one of the things I want to point out here as we go forward is how we treat and handle one another, because that is the emphasis of this parsha, right? So I found in the Etz Chaim commentary, along this parsha Mishpatim, it says, our standards for how we treat others must be based not on a social utilitarian concern, the desire for an orderly society, but on the recognition of the image of God in every person and the presence of God in every relationship. In other words, are we trying to develop a good society just to have a good society? Or are we trying to, I'm going to paraphrase it this way, to walk in his kingdom here and now? To learn to walk in his ways, to learn to walk according to his heart, to see his kingdom here. Matter of fact, isn't that prayed quite often? Thy kingdom come. It's not just a matter of coming someday, it's learning to walk in it today, right? So these are some of the things we need to take a look at, some of the things we need to examine. When we start to see that Yahweh, that is that life within us and that light that is within us, but it's also the life and the light that is in our brother. So we cannot look down on one another. We cannot belittle one another. We are all relevant in the kingdom. And so we've got to learn to walk together as we are learning to walk in accordance with his ways. Okay? So Mishpatim, this parsha, Mishpatim, shows a commitment to live as part of a community and to demonstrate a lifestyle of holiness, to learn to be a people set apart. How do we do that? Romans 12:4-5 says, for just as there are many parts that compose one body, the parts don't all have the same function. So there are many of us, and in union with the Messiah, we comprise one body, with each of us belonging to the others. See, we say, I'm not my own, I've been bought with a price, and say we belong to Yahweh because he redeemed me, and that's awesome. But what happens when we see these scriptures where it says, you're part of a body, so you belong to the rest of the body? See, that's where life seems to get difficult. You know why? Because we don't want to see it that way. We want, well, no, that doesn't make sense to me. I want it the way I want it. But maybe that's just one way of looking at things. Because even within our body, there are different pieces, parts, and they all have different functions. Well, they all have to focus on their function. But they can't say that their function is not relevant to the rest of the body, or everything has to be done the way that it wants to be done. No, each part of the body has its own function, and it needs to do that. But so does every other part of the body. See, and that's how the body learns to work together. All right. Romans 12:16 says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly, and never be wise in your own sight. You know why? Because that causes us to be prideful, arrogant, and it's easy to get lifted up that way. And it's hard to approach the Father when that's your mindset, right? No, because we've got to remain teachable. Talmid, right? We are a Talmid. Talmidim is the word for disciples, and that means we're learning. So we have to make sure we stay good students. We have to make sure we are continually learning, which means there are a lot of things that we know. There are a lot of things that we've grown in, but there are a lot of things we don't know. So we need to continually be learning. And the best way to do that is to remain humble. But part of this is learning to come together because we all learn from one another. I mean, yes, we learn from Yahweh, but we all learn from one another as well. So we need to be able to come together to do that. Hebrews 10:24 says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. I think we see the day drawing near. What day? The day. I mean, we say it like that. I mean, I think everyone has the idea. You know, we're talking of the last day, the last great day, right? The world will come to an end at some point, and where will we be at the end of that? Okay? So don't forsake assembling yourselves together. I know it's hard for some people who really don't live in areas where they have assemblies or congregations or other families they can get together with. But seek it out. Seek it out, because we have to make sure that we are learning from Yahweh and learning from one another. In other words, what are those words that go with learning from one another? Accountability, responsibility. These things go together. So we have to make sure we're walking according to that, right? Because sometimes we may just have some thoughts that might be a little left to center, and we need to be corrected in that. And then other times we may have some things where it sounds great and we need encouraged to follow through with that. So again, this is all part of learning to live in a community with one another, okay? Proverbs 18, 1 and 2 says, "Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire, and he breaks out against all sound judgment. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." Psalm 133, 1 says, "Behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together in unity." So what we see here, it's not just what I think is all that matters, see, but it's what I think as a person within the community of Yahweh, a person of Israel, all gathered in to be part of the family. So how does what I think fit in with the whole? You know, and how does what I think help build the kingdom here among us? How does what I think show the heart of the Father here in the earth? He says, "I put you here to be a light to the nations," right? Yeshua said he was the light of the world, but he also said to his disciples, "You are the light of the world." So how can we be that light? We've got to learn to be that light among a world that's dark. And we show that by our love for one another. And one of these things in Mishpatim is showing us how to have relationship with one another, right? Let's keep going. I found in the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary, Bruce Wells puts it this way: "In addition to the laws that are part of the Sinai covenant, the biblical text includes statements that at first glance appear to be more at home in Proverbs than Exodus. But what this wisdom material can do, however, is to help clarify the nature of the entire block of stipulations in Exodus 21 through 23. While the biblical text certainly seems to make rules, it also points toward a particular interest in the spirit as well as the letter of the law." How many of us have heard that? Oh, we need to learn to walk according to the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. Well, here's the thing, guys. In order to walk according to the spirit of the law, you need to learn what the letter says. You can't learn to walk in the heart behind something if you don't know what that something is. So what I'm saying is, in order to walk according to the spirit of the Torah, we have to learn what the Torah says. And how do we learn how all this comes together? We have to know the one who gave it. What better way than to know what's in the book than to know the author, right? So we have to learn to walk according to his heart. And that's when we start to learn what the word is and what the intent and thoughts behind that is, which we know that is his heart and his character. That when Yahweh spoke, he revealed his character, his life, his desires to a people that he set apart and redeemed, right? So Romans 7:14 says, "We know the Torah is of the Spirit. As for me, I'm bound to the old nature, sold to sin as a slave." 1 Timothy 1:8 says, "We know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully." Psalm 119, 142 says, "Your righteousness is eternal righteousness, and your Torah is truth." So how can the letter be wrong? It's only wrong if you're learning it just as that, just as the words on the page, and it's dun, 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 kind of thing. It's just a big list, right? And this is what I have to do. that becomes burdensome and it becomes hard. But if we have a relationship with the one who wrote it, if we're saying like King David did, your word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against you. See, if we have that relationship, then we're going to want to learn to walk in his ways. And that doesn't become burdensome anymore. It becomes a labor of love. It becomes, I want to walk with him. I want to walk in his righteousness. It's not our own righteousness. It's his righteousness. So when we're learning to walk with him, right? I mean, isn't that what the scripture says in relationship to Yeshua? That if we're following him, we should learn to walk as he walked. Well, how did he walk? He walked perfectly in accordance with the word that the people had. Okay? So here, let's continue. The legal material too in Exodus can also point beyond itself to principles of living and decision-making that are about more than simply ensuring that a rule has not been violated. They are about a commitment, listen to this, they are about a commitment to live as a part of a community that has a special relationship with Yahweh and that pursues a lifestyle in keeping with that relationship. Do you see that? This is about people making a commitment to Yahweh and to one another that we will learn to live together in a community as a people set apart to Yahweh, and we are making that commitment to him, to each other, that we will all learn to walk in his ways together. And when we find areas that we are wrong, we will change. But again, if we can all get on the road and learn to walk in the same path, we can go the same direction without being on top of each other. You know what I mean? Okay, it is a narrow path, but there's still enough room for a few people on that path. Okay? Let's look at James 4:17. It says, therefore, to him who knows to do good and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. Matthew 23:23 says, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Now look at that. That's where a lot of people stop. But what does it continue to say? These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. What he says is that, they were keeping the letter of the law, but their heart wasn't in it. They may have started off with good intentions, but somewhere they forgot why they were doing it. And it just became this has to be done and you have to do this way and all that, right? But you can't forget why you're doing this, because the basis of all of this is our relationship with Yahweh. See, if we're doing this because we love him, that's different than just saying, well, this is how I have to live and do things in accordance with society, right? No, it's because I love him and I'm going to learn to walk in his ways, and I'm going to learn to walk along with my brother as well, right? So one example of Mishpat that we see here, and I'm only going to go over really this one because there are a lot in here. Exodus 23, verse 4 and 5. It says, if you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it, and you shall rescue it with him. Now, if we go forward to Deuteronomy 22, we see, whereas before it said, if you meet your enemy's ox or someone who hates you, now here in Deuteronomy 22, it says something about your brother's ox. See, now notice the difference in here. You shall not see your brother's ox or his sheep going astray and ignore them. You shall take them back to your brother. And if he does not live near you, or you do not know who he is, that's interesting. Stop there for a second. How can you not know who your brother is or where he lives? See, so what this is saying is there are some who you may be in covenant with, but you don't know them like right now, today, but you're in covenant with them. They're your brother, right? So even in that, if you find a lost sheep, you are to care for it and return it to your brother. And again, that makes me think of Yeshua and the sheep, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. We are supposed to help find the lost sheep and return them to him, right? Well, let's keep going. So verse 2 is where we're at. So if he does not live near you and you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home to your house, and it shall stay with you until your brother seeks it. Then you shall restore it to him. And you shall do the same with his donkey or with his garment or with any lost thing of your brother's which he loses and you find. You may not ignore it. You shall not see your brother's donkey or his ox fallen down by the way and ignore them. You shall help him to lift them up again. Now there's an interesting thing here in this. It doesn't say necessarily you're going to do it for him. It says you're going to help your brother. And isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to help one another. But there is something here that we need to look at called reciprocity, where you're not going to do something for someone all the time, but if your brother needs help, you will help. In other words, I'm not going to do it for you. I will help you though. And there is a point in our life where we do have to take responsibility for our actions, and we do have to make steps to better our situation, right? I mean, if we need the help, great, reach out and get the help, right? But if we're not willing to do what we need to do for the help, then no matter how much somebody else tries to help us, it's not going to help you because you're going to remain where you're at. See, and that's a tough thing in relationships as well. You know, if you are doing that, then you're not really helping your brother. You are enabling your brother to stay in a situation that he needs to get out of. Now, at the same time, there are all times where we're having a hard time in difficult situations, and we may feel like giving up or stopping. And that's when we need someone to come along and to be that brother for us and help lift us up and help get us back in the road, right? Back into where we need to be. But you can only drag somebody so far. You know, there comes a point where we all have to step and take responsibility for our own actions. But if your brother needs your help, help him. Okay? That's the point we're looking at here. You will care for him. So here, and again, Jonathan Sachs puts it this way. We owe duties to those who recognize the concept of duty. We have a responsibility to those who acknowledge responsibility. If, however, the person concerned refuses to exercise his duty to his own overloaded animal, then we do not make things better by coming to his aid. On the contrary, we may make it worse by allowing him to escape responsibility. What we're learning here is to take responsibility for your actions within the community and to see your responsibility beyond yourself. See, again, what did Yeshua tell us? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. Let's look at it. Matthew 22:36. Yeshua was approached. He said, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the Torah and the law? And he said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And look at verse 40. On these two commands depend or hang all the law and the prophets. What we see here is if these two things is the explanation of everything in the Torah. Every single thing in the Torah can be broken down into one of these two categories. This is showing how to love the Lord your God, or showing how to love your neighbor as yourself. And yeah, that's in the Torah. Now, there are many subcategories. You can break it down and you can get fine-tuned with it and everything else. That's fine. But everything can be broken down into one of these two areas. And that's what we need to learn. Okay. So at first glance, if you just look through this portion, you start to see a book of rules. However, we can now see that this is really showing us how to walk in covenant with the one who has redeemed us. Remember, we have this because he redeemed us. Yahweh did not come to Israel while they were still in Egypt and say, these are things that I'm commanding you to do right now. Once you get that straight and get all that ironed out and get it perfect, then I'll bring you out. No, that's not what he did, is it? He said, I will deliver you. I will bring you out. I will redeem you. I will take you as my people. I will be your God, right? So this is what we're looking at. He redeemed them, brought them out, brought them to himself, and says, now that I have redeemed you, I want you to learn how to walk in a path that is pleasing to me and beneficial to you. Okay? And that's where we get hung up on things. All right? What we have here as we're reading through these chapters, 21 through 24, it's often what's called the Book of the Covenant. Well, I thought the whole book was the Book of the Covenant. Well, yeah, it is. But there are many covenants within the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. There are many covenants that we see and examples of them. But this phrase, the Book of the Covenant, was expressed in relationship to these chapters of the Torah. Why? Look, it mainly comes from chapter 24, verse 7, from Exodus, and it says, Moses took the book of the covenant and he read it to the people. So the book refers to the laws in Exodus 21 through 23, but Exodus 24:7 also says that the people responded how? They responded to the reading of all these laws by saying, we will obey, we will be obedient to these things. Why? We will uphold these ways because they are showing us how to walk according to the covenant that we have been brought into. It's not a matter of do these things and you will be in covenant. No. It says this is the book of the covenant that is put together, which we see in chapter 24. He talks about the blood of the covenant in accordance with these words. So we see this covenant is why we walk in these ways. Okay? These laws that we find here, the principles or values or whatever you want to call them among Israel, but they were supposed to be loyal in order to fulfill their portion of the covenant with Yahweh. They were supposed to say, we are yours, we will learn to walk in your ways. And that's what these things help to show us. Now, when we see the Book of the Covenant, there are four, if you want to call them chapters, you can go for it, right? But let's just say 4 parts. Okay, 4 parts to this Book of the Covenant that we see here. And I'll break them down for you because they are kind of categorized in a certain manner. In Exodus 21, verses 2 through chapter 22, verse 16, we find things relationship of civil and criminal things that we are to live according to and come in contact with. Civil and criminal, I don't want to say laws, but these are the things that we are to look at. In Exodus 22:17 to 23:19, this covers areas that are humanitarian considerations, just how we treat one another, handle one another, disagreements with one another, just day-to-day kind of things that we may be involved in and how we do that. In Exodus 23:20 through 23:33, we find divine promises and warnings about assimilation. We find that Yahweh says, I have promises for you. I've got great things for you, but you've got to learn to walk in accordance with these words that I'm giving you. Do not be assimilated into the ways of where you're going. Okay. And then in chapter 24, we find that the document or the Book of the Covenant is ratified among all Israel. Okay. So all of these it's you can just look at this and say, wow, this is just a lot of laws for how we're supposed to live within a society. In one manner of speaking, it is. But if you don't have that relationship, you're not going to see this as beneficial to you. Okay? But when we have that relationship with Yahweh and that relationship with one another, then we're going to see how these things can benefit all of us together when we start to see this is the heart of the Father, and this is how we learn to walk with Him. All right? Again, the point of this is that Mishpatim is showing us how to live as part of a community and how to demonstrate a lifestyle of holiness, how to live, like we said in Romans, how to live as part of a body where each piece and part has its own function, its own identity, its own way of doing things, but it's beneficial to the rest of the body. It's not self-serving. It's beneficial to the rest of the body as a whole. And again, even if we look at throughout all the Mishpatim, well, you said there are 4 parts of this book. How can this be summed up in 2? Love the Lord your God and your neighbor, right? Well, it can. Because if we do this, we can see there's a summation of the Mishpatim, right? Exodus 21:1 to 22:19, we see respect for man. And Exodus 22:20 to 22:26, we see the fear of Adonai. 23:1 to 23:9, again, love your neighbor. And 23:10 to 23:19, we see love Adonai. Now, the point I'm getting here at is that where we see respect for man, it goes in with love your neighbor. And this part where we see is the fear of Adonai shows us to love Adonai as well. So again, we see to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. We're seeing all of these, even in these Mishpatim, where some of these things, well, why this or why that? But all of this is showing part of the character of the God that we serve, and part of the character that he's desiring to work in us, that we're learning to walk according to his heart, his ways, by his Ruach HaKodesh, and that's how we're going to do it. That's how we're going to see his kingdom here and established among us today, now. We've got to learn to walk with him. You know, Yeshua said the same thing, didn't he? He didn't say, consider me. He said, follow me. See, again, that's relationship. That's learning who he is. That's learning to walk in his ways. That's being with him among the journey. It's not just a one-time acknowledgement. It's relationship. And that's what the Father's calling us to, relationship. We've got to learn to walk in his ways. All right. Well, that's all we've got for you today. I pray that these Torah portions, I hope they challenge you, I hope they encourage you, I hope they bless you, and love your feedback as well, guys. So please get back to us and let us know what you think and what you're thinking. In the meantime, be blessed, and may the Lord bless you and keep you. Shalom.